My husband gave away the $50,000 we saved for our dream honeymoon to his boss as a gift. When I demanded an explanation, his boss laughed and said, "That's what real men do." I smiled, took a sip of wine, and made a move no one expected. 2 years later, Levi and I started dating when I was 31 and he was 33. I'd just finished a big residential project in Hendersonville, working with a wealthy client who'd trusted me to redesign her entire mountain estate. I'd put everything I had into it, emotionally, creatively, even physically. I remember coming home after 12-hour days, my fingers stained with wood finishes and swatches in my purse instead of lipsticks. I loved it. Levi came into my life during that chaos, and it almost felt cinematic. We met at a small wine bar downtown, no loud music, just the kind of ambient hum that makes conversation feel intentional. He was confident, smooth-talking, charismatic in a way that bordered on theatrical. And I fell for it, for him. At first, he was everything I didn't know I wanted. Ambitious, assertive, the kind of man who didn't just make plans, he made them happen. He worked in corporate tech sales, had big dreams of rising to the top, and a shelf full of self-help books that preached winning over feeling. We married after 2 years. It wasn't a huge wedding. Around 70 people, close friends and family, tucked away at the Biltmore estate, elegant, intimate, and us. Instead of going straight into a honeymoon, we decided to wait. Save. Plan the kind of trip people spend their lives dreaming about. We wanted to do it right. 3 weeks in Italy, Amalfi, Rome, Florence, Venice. 5-star stays, local guides, cooking classes, winery tours. The full experience. And we saved. Every month, we put money aside. Sometimes 1,000, sometimes 500, depending on the month. We didn't touch it. We were up to $50,000 by spring of that year. But then something shifted. Levi got promoted, senior sales executive. His meetings became dinners. His evenings stretched later. And he started talking about Malcolm. Malcolm was his boss. Older. Wealthy. Married 3 times. Owned a boat, multiple properties, and apparently had this almost cult-like following among his executives. According to Levi, being close to Malcolm meant being next in line for greatness. The man turns everything he touches into gold, Levi once told me, like he was reciting scripture. I never met Malcolm in those early months. I only heard about him. Stories of power, of strategic brilliance. Levi talked like he was being mentored by a legend. I didn't love it, something about it felt off. Worshipful. But I kept my mouth shut. Until one night. It was a Wednesday. I was home, sipping a glass of Barbera I'd been saving. Levi walked in around 10:45 p.m. He looked buzzed, but not drunk, just wired. I could feel the energy before he spoke. "I did something," he said, loosening his tie. "Oh?" I asked, casually. He nodded, sat down next to me, and said it like he was announcing a win. "I gave the $50,000 to Malcolm." I remember my stomach going cold. I turned to look at him, unsure if I'd misheard. "Our honeymoon fund?" He nodded again, smiling like he'd just played a masterstroke. "It was an investment. A show of trust. Malcolm respects loyalty." For a few seconds, I didn't speak. I just looked at him. There wasn't even shame in his eyes. He truly believed he'd done something right. "Did you talk to me about this?" "It was a spontaneous opportunity," he said. "It had to be bold." That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I called Malcolm's office under the guise of dropping something off for Levi. His assistant was polite and let me in. Malcolm's office was exactly what I expected: leather, glass, and silent power. He was sitting behind a desk the size of a small dining table. He stood when I entered. Tall, gray-haired, sharp eyes. I introduced myself. He offered me a seat. "So, what brings you in?" he asked. I just wanted to confirm something, I said. Did my husband give you $50,000? He smirked. Not a twitch of shame or embarrassment. He did, Malcolm said. That's what real men do. That line? Burned into my brain. I didn't flinch. Just smiled, opened the bottle of Chianti I'd brought, a gift, apparently, and poured us both a glass. Then I stood. Well, here's to real men, Malcolm, I said. And to women who know exactly what to do next. And I left. Levi never even knew I visited his boss. Instead, I began preparing. I spoke to a lawyer. Quietly moved some of my personal assets, my studio equipment, savings, things he didn't even realize were in my name. I started documenting everything. The gift, the conversations, even texts he sent bragging about how Malcolm was finally seeing his worth. Over the next 2 months, I pretended everything was fine. I smiled. Cooked. Slept next to him while I made plans to leave him. When I filed for divorce, Levi looked stunned. Genuinely shocked. As if he hadn't given away our dreams for the sake of a man who wouldn't return his calls in a year. The court battle was long, but not as hard as I thought it would be. North Carolina law worked in my favor. Misuse of marital assets without consent? Bad look for him. And Malcolm? He ghosted Levi the second rumors of financial misconduct in the company started swirling. He was trying to clean house. Levi was one of the first messes to go. I got the house. The car. A large portion of our joint savings, the rest of which Levi had already hemorrhaged trying to stay in Malcolm's good graces. I moved out anyway. Too many memories. I relocated to Charleston for a bit. Started over. A client I'd once done a living room redesign for referred me to a boutique hotel owner in the area who wanted an elevated southern aesthetic. That job turned into 4 more. Then word of mouth kicked in. I rebranded everything under my maiden name. No mention of Levi. Just design. Clean lines. Intentional spaces. And freedom. I went to Italy, by the way. Not with someone. Alone. I walked along the Arno in Florence. Sat on a terrace in Positano drinking limoncello. Wandered through Rome, past couples on their honeymoons, and felt nothing but gratitude. Levi sent me a message the week I got back. His company had officially collapsed. Malcolm was facing federal charges, insider trading, some fraud stuff I didn't bother to dig into. Levi had been let go quietly. He wanted to talk. I left him on read. I left his message unread for months. It sat there in my inbox like an old unpaid bill, not urgent, but annoying. Levi wasn't just a chapter one wanted to close. He was a different book. One I'd outgrown. And yet, he kept resurfacing in the oddest ways. Mutual friends would bring him up over drinks, cautiously testing the waters to see if I was over it. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a strong reaction. Just a shrug and a sip of whatever was in front of me. The truth? I wasn't angry anymore. I was just exhausted by the idea of him. That kind of selfishness takes up too much space, even in memory. I was busy anyway. The design firm I'd created in Charleston, well, it started to feel like something real. What began as a few high-end boutique jobs turned into something with momentum. Referrals poured in. I hired 2 junior designers. Took on commercial work. My days were filled with fabric samples, contractor meetings, and balancing color palettes against light exposure. I loved it. And then came the award. It was small. Regional. But meaningful. Best Emerging Interior Design Studio in the Southeast, presented by a local architecture association. They invited me to speak at a small panel. I wore a linen jumpsuit, soft curls, no wedding ring. The topic was designing with intention. And midway through my answer to a question about personal inspiration, I said something I hadn't planned. I used to design around other people's approval, I told them. their tastes, their priorities, their egos. I built entire spaces to make someone else feel powerful. But now? I design for peace. For freedom. For people who want to feel at home in their own skin. There was a pause. Then applause. I don't think it was because I said something profound, it was because I said something true. After the panel, a woman came up to me. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, professional but tired. She said, "I know what it's like to get burned by someone you thought you could build a life with." We didn't talk details. We didn't have to. Sometimes, shared experience doesn't need a full sentence to be understood. In the months that followed, I began to share bits of my story more openly. Not all of it. Just moments. A video here. A blog post there. I didn't name Levi, of course. I didn't need to. One post, about financial control in marriage, went semi-viral. Nothing crazy. But enough that my inbox filled with messages from women in similar shoes. Some younger, still trying to make sense of it. Some older, wondering if it was too late to start over. I answered every single one. Slowly. But I answered. It became a quiet mission. Helping women who were smarter than they gave themselves credit for, who just needed someone to tell them, it's not too late. You are not crazy. And no, you don't need to ask permission to leave. One of those messages stayed with me. A woman from Knoxville wrote, "My husband didn't give our honeymoon fund to his boss. He bought a boat, with his secretary." She posted a video of them popping champagne on it. I just froze. I didn't even cry. Just froze. I thought I was safe. I wrote back, "You're still safe. You just haven't landed yet." Back in Asheville, Levi was struggling. I didn't follow him on anything, but word got around. He tried to start a consulting company, leveraging his old title and past mentorship under Malcolm, but it flopped. No one trusted anyone associated with that circle anymore. The industry had shifted. Loyalty to ego-driven dinosaurs wasn't impressive, it was toxic. Someone told me he'd started driving Uber part-time. I didn't judge it, people do what they need to survive. But the irony didn't escape me. The man who once said real men make power plays was now asking if passengers wanted the AUX cord. I didn't gloat. Not because I'm noble, but because I didn't care enough to. There was one day, though, one strange, almost cinematic day, that he came back into my orbit. It was a rainy Tuesday in Asheville. I'd driven back up for a short-term project, helping design a small family-run wine bar off Merrimon Avenue. The owners wanted rustic elegance, but with a modern twist. I'd sourced hand-carved beams from a place in Tennessee, picked out emerald velvet seating, and was overseeing the installation that morning. As I was walking back to my car with samples tucked under my arm, I heard my name. Not the voice I remembered. It was smaller. Tentative. I turned. It was Levi. Umbrella in hand, soaked slacks from what I assume was a sprint across the street. Hair longer than I remembered. He looked tired, like life had pulled some of the shine out of him. We stared at each other for a second. Then he stepped closer. "I saw your work in that hotel downtown," he said. "It's beautiful." I nodded. "Thanks." Silence again. "I didn't know how to fix it," he said, voice low. "It wasn't broken," I said, "it just wasn't built to last." He looked like he wanted to say more, but I didn't have space for it. "I've got a meeting," I said, adjusting the samples in my arms. He nodded. "Of course." And that was it. We didn't hug. We didn't exchange numbers. We didn't even look back when we walked away. Just two people, once bound by vows, now strangers in the same city, carrying the weight of choices neither could undo. After that encounter in the rain, I thought about Levi more than I wanted to. Not out of longing, not even anger. Just reflection. I think seeing him stripped of the swagger, the posturing, the charm, it shook something loose in me. For a long time, I carried this quiet shame. Like maybe I should have seen it sooner. Maybe if I'd paid more attention to the way he talked about people, the way he always needed to be seen as the smartest guy in the room, I would have noticed the rot beneath the polish. But the truth is, sometimes we don't fall for who they are, we fall for who they convince us they might become. I was back in Charleston by the weekend. The weather had warmed up early that year. The kind of breeze that makes you want to leave windows open and play jazz even if you're alone. Business was good. Booking steady. I was booked out for the next 6 months. And then, without really planning to, I started seeing someone. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sweeping. It was subtle, the way healthy things often are. His name was Wes. He was an architect, not flashy, not loud. Mid-40s, quiet confidence, more comfortable behind blueprints than in front of a crowd. We met through a client collaboration, one of those, oh, you'll both get along great introductions. And for once, they were right. At first, we only talked about work. He'd send me plans, I'd send back comments. Practical. Professional. But then one day he sent me a photo of a chair in an old New Orleans jazz club. The email subject was just, inspiration? It made me smile. Something about the tone, playful, observant. Thoughtful. Our text started drifting from work. He asked about my favorite buildings in Italy. I asked if he believed in soulmates for spaces, places that just felt like they were waiting for you. One night, I invited him to an install wrap-up dinner. Just the two of us. Nothing romantic on the surface. But I wore lipstick anyway. We drank wine on the balcony of the client's finished home, watching the moon rise over the harbor. We didn't touch, didn't flirt, not really. But the silence between us didn't feel awkward. It felt full. Afterward, he walked me to my car and said, "You don't owe anyone softness." I blinked. What? He shrugged. You hold yourself like someone who's always preparing to explain why she left. I didn't say anything. Just nodded. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was anxious, but because something in me was beginning to settle. We kept seeing each other. Slowly. I didn't rush into it. I didn't tell anyone at first. I needed this one to belong only to me for a while. Wes never asked about Levi, and I didn't volunteer. But one evening, over takeout on my couch, he said something that stayed with me. Whatever broke you before, he said, I hope it taught you more about your own strength than their weakness. And that was the difference. Levi always needed to be the hero in his story. Wes. He didn't mind being the background, as long as he was part of the structure that held everything steady. One weekend, I flew to Asheville again. I had no client meetings, just a sudden urge to visit my old neighborhood, the bookstore we used to go to on Sundays, the hiking trail behind the Arboretum. I didn't tell anyone I was in town. I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to feel. The house Levi and I had shared was up for sale. I parked across the street and sat in the car, engine off, just watching the for sale sign sway slightly in the wind. It looked smaller than I remembered. A young couple walked out with a realtor. They looked excited, like they were seeing a future. I didn't feel bitterness. Just a kind of distant hope for them. I hoped they would do better. Be better to each other. Before I left town, I visited one more place, the wine bar where I met Levi. It had changed ownership. New name. Different menu. But the same dim lighting, the same red brick walls. I sat at the bar alone and ordered a glass of the same Chianti I once poured for Malcolm. The bartender made small talk. I smiled and answered, but my mind was miles away, somewhere between then and now. I wasn't thinking about Levi. I was thinking about the version of me who once sat in this bar and thought she'd found forever. How young she was, even at 32. How much she didn't know about strength. About rebuilding. I lifted my glass in a quiet toast, not to the past, but to the woman who didn't let it define her. And when I drove back to Charleston the next morning, with the windows down and the radio low, I felt it for the first time in years, like I wasn't running from anything. Just moving towards something better. Months passed. Wes and I grew in tandem, not like a firework, but like ivy. Quiet, deliberate, strong. He never pushed. Never asked for more than I could give. But when I did give, he met me fully. It was the healthiest thing I'd ever been part of. And with stability came creativity. My work flourished. I was featured in a regional design magazine. A boutique property firm offered me a contract for 6 properties along the coast. I started a mentorship group for young female designers navigating the male-dominated architecture and real estate world. Life felt abundant. Until Levi resurfaced, again. This time, not with a text. Not with a sad smile in the rain. But with something else entirely. A podcast. Yes, a podcast. Someone forwarded it to me. You might want to hear this, the message said. It was a 40-minute episode titled, Climbing Back from the Fall. I hesitated, then hit play. There was Levi's voice. Older, raspier, still clinging to performative charm. The episode was a soft, almost apologetic monologue about how he'd lost everything chasing status, and how he was now focused on helping men rediscover purpose after failure. At first, I laughed. It was such a transparent rebrand, corporate bad boy to humbled life coach. But then I heard it. I had a wife once, he said. She left me after a business decision she didn't understand. I tried to build something for us. But not everyone can handle the risks men have to take. He paused. She wasn't a bad person. Just small-minded. And that? That woke something up in me. I wasn't angry. Not really. I'd moved beyond anger. But I was done letting him write my story like I was some footnote in his redemption arc. So I made a decision. I called a friend of mine, Penelope, a producer for a mid-tier design and lifestyle podcast. Her team was planning a special series on women who rebuilt from ruins. She'd already invited me once, and I'd politely declined. This time, I accepted. The episode was recorded in a cozy Charleston studio. No drama. No tears. Just clarity. I told my story. Not about Levi directly, I never said his name. I never even said the name of the company. But the details? Oh, they were surgical. A husband who gave away $50,000 of marital savings to his boss without consent. A boss who said, "That's what real men do." A woman who smiled, drank wine, and left quietly. Who built something from nothing. Who didn't take revenge in fire, but in freedom. The episode aired 2 weeks later. It climbed quickly. Because unlike Levi's vague self-pity piece, mine resonated. Real women. Real betrayal. Real recovery. Within the week, I started getting interview requests. Blogs, podcasts, even a design panel in Savannah themed around building after betrayal. The story struck a nerve. Then Penelope forwarded me an email. It was from him. To her. The subject line, "Please remove that episode, it paints me unfairly." She didn't reply. I didn't have to. Because here's the thing, revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes, it's watching the person who dismissed you struggle to hold on to a narrative you've outgrown. Watching them beg for a version of your silence they no longer deserve. Sometimes, it's becoming the version of yourself that they said you were incapable of being, not out of spite, but out of truth. A few months later, I got one final message from Levi. Just a line. "Congrats on everything. You always had it in you." No apology. No ownership. Just a quiet admission that he'd lost, not because I destroyed him, but because I didn't need him anymore. I didn't reply. I was busy reviewing blueprints for a women's co-working space I was designing downtown. Fully funded. Fully mine. Wes brought me a coffee halfway through my design review, kissed my cheek, and asked if I needed anything. I didn't. That night, as we sat on the porch watching the marsh grass dance in the wind, he asked if I'd ever thought about going back to Italy, not solo this time. I smiled. I've thought about it, I said. But this time, we do it differently. He nodded. Whatever you want. Just say when. And in that moment, I realized the best revenge wasn't ruining Levi. It was rebuilding myself so completely that there was nothing left for him to hold on to. Not bitterness. Not blame. Not even memory. Just distance. And peace.